Hello, hello. Mic check. 1, 2. Does it sound like Mikey on your end?
What does Mikey mean?
Does it sound like I'm talking in a mic?
A really good mic,
Does it
yeah.
sound like I'm talking on a podcast? Does it sound like I could start doing ASMR? Okay, amazing. Okay, well, in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Grievers Uncensored. I'm Yako.
And I'm Julia. Your grief is your own, and no one can tell you what to do with it. We're sorry you're here, but we're grateful that you found us, and we want you to know that you're never alone.
Yes, and be sure to follow us on TikTok. We have a great community on Instagram as well at Grief Uncensored Podcast. We do a series on Instagram called Feature Your Loved One, where you can send in photos of your loved one and a little caption, and we post it on our page in honor of them. We also on Facebook have a group with over 100 people in their 20s feeling the same things that we are. We have a Facebook page as well where you can just like and support us there. And you can find the links to all of that in our Instagram bio. Oh, and finally, we also do have a video version of our podcast on YouTube. So if you want to watch us, you can go ahead and do that as well. And that is all in our Instagram bio.
Ooh. Yeah, let's get right into it. What are we talking about today on this episode?
Today we're talking about going back to normal or going quote unquote normal. You know, it's kind of like COVID when they say like the new normal. It is like a new normal.
Except it fucking sucks and it's not the same.
No, it's not the same.
And that's how it is.
Yeah.
Post grieving too. Or no, post loss. Because
post loss, yeah. Going back to life after experiencing such a life-changing death is so fucking weird. It's just you just feel like in a bubble. Yeah, the bubble is the best way to describe it, is because you just feel like you're floating in your own world, you're in your own bubble, and it's a terrible bubble. Like, it's not like a cute little bubble. You're not like yeah. No.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, when people are like, okay, like, gotta go back to normal, like, if you think it would be like a positive thing, but in the grief lens, like, it is just dread all around, and you don't even feel like yourself. So how do you adjust to your new reality, but having to still be in the same space that you were before the loss?
Right.
You have to talk to the same people about the same things, and you have to go back to work, or you have to go back to school, or you just have to be in life. Like, and a lot of times, like, we have to kind of act like nothing happened. And a lot of times,
or we feel like we have to, like, in terms of like making other people uncomfortable. Like, for instance, when you're at work and you're with your coworkers, like, do you just tell them what happened, or do you just pretend like nothing really happened? They ask you how your weekend went, your freaking mom just died, and you're like, yeah, you know, it was a weekend. Like,
yeah,
you know,
like, you're like, oh, you know, for people who don't know, like, oh, what'd you do this weekend? I was like, ooh, how do I come up with a really believable lie right now? Because the reality was that I was probably planning a funeral or writing a eulogy or literally crying and oversleeping in my bed all weekend, isolating, grieving my mom and my friends and everything else, all my secondary, you know, it's like, to some extent, you cannot get around having to put on this mask. Like, if you need to go back into society, like, you have to somehow master the art of fucking fakeness.
Yeah. And we've talked about it in a previous episode where we were like grocery shopping or something, and you're like, even like something as simple as that, something as simple as going to the fucking grocery store and talking to the clerk.
Right, exactly.
And they're trying to make like a little small talk, like, oh, you're really getting these garbanzo beans right now? What are you gonna make?
What are you making?
Yeah, like, and you're just like,
I don't even know my name right now. Like, I'm sorry, what?
Or those little comments people say, like, oh, you should smile more, or like, you know, or just like, I don't know, just things. I feel like the weirdest part about it is just like because you feel like your life has been altered and you're a completely different person from on the other side, and then you feel like a completely different person, but you're in the same environment, like you said. Like it's
Exactly.
you feel like a different person, but in the same environment with the same people. That's just like, it's just so weird. It's such a hard thing to adjust to. Like, for instance, when I came back, I was also in a different country when my dad passed, and I was there for a whole month, like doing funeral services and like with my family and stuff. So when I came back to America, like everything felt different to me. Like it just didn't feel like, I don't know. It just took a while for me to feel like San Diego was the same San Diego that I had left behind. Like it felt so dull. Everything felt like quiet, almost like I don't know.
So true.
I don't know how to explain.
No, I totally know what you mean, because like I remember coming home, you know, arriving back in San Diego, and when I got back to my house, I just remember walking through the door. You know, when I first found out, I
Right.
drove home and walked through the door and like looked at my sister sitting on the couch, and like that moment is something that I cannot ever forget. So like I think that coming home to that home was just horrible. It felt different, and like honestly, I just couldn't wait to get out of there.
Yeah.
Your space that you're in, you just see that you know, that loss. So I mean, also for me, like I came back to school only a couple months after the loss, because I only had one semester left. And, you know, you kind of just have to pretend like nothing happened. Like, welcome back to school, guys, your final semester. Like, this is it. Like, you know, you got to push hard for your last semester and like do your last final project. And then, you know, like everyone's like getting all excited what they're going to do after they graduate. And everyone's talking about their future. And like,
Oh my God.
no, like after that winter break, for me, my winter break was literally going to a funeral and not celebrating any holidays, because I was just, all of our family was shocked and traumatized. So that was my winter break. And then we come back and we're like, oh my gosh, last semester of school, like so exciting. Like, meanwhile, how I'm just so confused how I even am supposed to pretend like I want to be here right now, because I don't.
Yeah. I think you also make a really good point in that, like, you're returning to an environment where, like, you returning to an environment that you had pre-loss, or like where you found out about the loss, or like you having like experienced that traumatic thing like in that environment, like triggers, it's like PTSD in a way, because like,
oh yeah,
like you seeing certain things like triggers that memory. Like for instance, I didn't have this experience because I found out in Japan, but for my sister, she found out in her home. So after she came home from that trip, like the first thing you think about is like you finding out, like you said, or like, you know, just like some really horrible, heartbreaking shit that now is associated with that location.
Oh yeah, dude, 100%. Like I just did not want to be there anymore. I couldn't wait to move. Like I was like, nope. And even after I moved out of that house, like it just had so many bad memories for me, even though it was like a great house. And you know, like I wish I could have a positive, you know, viewpoint of it, but like it's just impossible after that. And like I was so traumatized, like I didn't even want to go back to that neighborhood, like driving through, like it actually like gave me anxiety, like going like I just like, no, I can't, like I cannot even go back there, like it just gave me so much anxiety.
I feel that way too about where I was. The anticipatory loss was so prominent like months before he passed away, and so that like house that I was in at the time like just triggers me so bad, because I know I was so mentally ill and like not okay during
like,
that
why
time.
would you want to revisit that?
And so like when I drive close to it, it's such a weird feeling. Like it's so weird. And I also remember like driving past like this church that I prayed at right before I left to Japan. I'm like praying for his health and stuff. I remember driving past that and like being triggered. There's just so many. I think the triggers is a huge thing. Is like they're so they're everywhere. They're fucking everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're so vulnerable and so sensitive to them that it's it's heartbreaking to be in the existing. It's heartbreaking to exist.
Just to exist.
Yeah. And Michelle Zauner, which I've mentioned already like 5 times in this podcast series, she talks about being in HMAR and seeing like families together, and even something like that is triggering, and it's not something you can escape when you're existing.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, that just kind of circles back to the whole point, which is just like, you just like, how do you merge back into normal life? Like, it just feels and seems like the most impossible task. And you have to talk to people normally, like, even though nothing is normal in your life or inside of you, like, you do have to act like a normal person, and like, for me, like, I just wanted to isolate. I did not want to answer text messages, and like, I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't want, if somebody invited me, I was like, why are you even inviting me? Because I'm not coming. Like, I mean, like, that's truly how I felt in the beginning, because
no, if anything, it was like offensive to me that you
you're right.
It's like, why are you asking me to go drink at a bar right now?
Exactly. Like, why the fuck would I want to go to the club when my mom just died? Like, you're so inconsiderate. But like, obviously they meant no malice, but it's like, I cannot even fathom being a normal person. And I don't want to, again, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to text anyone. Like, I said this in a previous episode, but I was like, if I do want to see anyone, it's going to be like the closest of the closest friends, and we're not going to do anything. Like, we're like, the most we do is go get food. Like,
literally.
And but like, I don't know if I even really have an answer to how do you like react to having to get thrown back into the wolves after they went through this really traumatic experience. But like, I do feel like I have some guidelines after going through it. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, this is a really interesting topic because it can go into a lot of different aspects. Like, the main one, in my opinion, would be like, when you don't want to talk and answer people, right? Like, you're trying to isolate. It kind of brings up the fact that we have a lot of different friends for different reasons. And like, you just have different friends for different things, right? You have different friend groups a lot of the time. If you like to keep your circle small, super small, like, maybe this doesn't apply to you as much. But, at least for us, we were in college, so we kind of had a big group of friends. And for me, like, some of the friends, it was like, okay, these are obviously friends that if they text me like, hey, like, what's up? I'm going to either ignore, or I'm going to want to say something that's like, what's up? What do you fucking think is up? Like, fuck you. Like, but then there's other people in your life who they text you and you kind of feel that they're actually being genuine, and they, are like, you feel that you can open up to them. But I mean, like, again, it just goes, when we spoke about this in a lot of different episodes, but it's just like
something that takes time, I think, to figure out too. Like, sometimes you don't know right away, and I think that a huge part of having to return back to normal is like trial and error, like trying things and being like, okay, well, that made me feel like shit and I cannot do that again. And it's a lot of that because everybody's different and everybody has different social capacities. Everybody grieves differently. Everybody has different coping mechanisms. For some people, that may just be throw yourself back into the normalcy and just go back, just go back to normal and just do that. For other people, it's like small increments and it takes a lot of time to like be able to go back to doing certain things, right? For me, that's how I felt. It's like that it took me a long time.
Totally. Like, it took me months and months to, like you said, increments of time to slowly integrate back into quote unquote normal life.
Right.
Like, it really does just take time, and like you said, trial and error. I think that was really spot on.
Yeah.
And also, like, I think something that could also help is obviously recognizing which people deserve your grief and which people deserve, you opening up to them. And then you don't have to show that to everyone. And like, it's okay to kind of protect that, protect your grief to a certain extent. Obviously I'm always for encouraging you to speak your truth. But like, sometimes people say insensitive things and you want to just like kind of make them see exactly how you're hurting. But a lot of times like you're not going to get the response you want. Like, I think a lot of people will text and again, they don't mean harm, but they just do things. People who don't understand do and say things that they just see in movies or that they just see in life, even though that's not the right thing. But like if somebody asks you, like, how are you doing? You're going to want to say, well, how do you think I'm doing?
Yeah.
And like, that's what you want to say. But like, I think it would help to have like a toolbox of like generic answers that you give people when they say like things that are kind of insensitive, because like then you don't have to like get mad. Like you can just be like, oh, this person's saying another insensitive thing to me. Okay, let me go into my toolbox and give them another generic answer. Like, oh, I'm okay. Like, thanks for asking. I'm just, figuring out how to like go forward with my life, just whatever you want to say. But literally you can give the same generic answer to everyone who's like saying this shit to you that you don't want to talk about. Obviously that doesn't like mean for everyone like a blanket statement, but it is a blanket statement for people who you just don't feel like getting into it, like your boss or like your coworker or your someone in your class. Like if somebody asks you, oh, like what happened, like if somebody asks me what happened, I'm not gonna fucking tell my coworker, like unless they're my close friend. Like, no, I'm gonna tell my close friends. Obviously I'm not gonna tell everybody. So like just protect your peace in that way. Because if you don't like if you don't know what to say, you're gonna be shocked and taken aback like every time someone asks you like something like that. And if you have something that you already just know what to say, like you don't have to, that anger doesn't boil up inside of you every single time.
Right. And even hearing you talk, I realized that I'm kind of different from you in the sense that I like told every single person I knew, except I don't know. I feel like most people, even like people I was like, this is going to be so awkward with, I just told them. I just was like, yeah. And if just like, I just couldn't even hide it, like it was like really tough. And I think that a lot of people are different in that way, because some people, when they go back to work in school, they don't tell their boss or they don't tell their professors, and they just rather just deal with it on their own. And for me, I found that virtually impossible. Like I had to tell. Even when I was like applying for a job, I was like, my dad passed, like, and like some people would be like, oh, that doesn't look good because now that means like you're really struggling, or I don't know, just like some people don't feel like that's okay. But I just felt like I want to be as transparent as possible with anybody in my life too, because it helps them understand like what the fuck I'm going through and give me that sympathy and empathy that I really needed. Like
I totally agree. Like I think even though I just said, not everyone deserves to know your story. I think as far as transparency goes, when it can actually really help you, that is crucial, because if you just like hide it and don't tell anyone, like your professors or your boss, like what you're going through, like they're gonna not, I mean, to an extent, like a lot of people are like, I don't want people to treat me differently, but like when people treat you differently, at least they're giving you like a little bit more leeway, or they're trying to at least try to have some type of sympathy or empathy for you. Like I agree with you. Like I told all my professors because there was no way in hell I was going to hide it from them, because I knew I needed extra time. I knew I needed extra, extensions, like, because it was just not, without that, I would not have passed. Like I wouldn't have been able to do it. I needed people to have extra understanding for me. So I would definitely say that's definitely another good guideline, is like, be transparent about it. Like, is it awkward? Probably fucking awkward as hell. But like it does help to have people on your side. Like you need to have advocates. And they're not always going to be doing the right thing, that's for sure. But it is better than them not knowing at all. And again,
everybody's
obviously,
different. Yeah. So maybe
yeah,
some people are like, that's better for me. But
right.
also, like you were saying about how like some people don't want to be treated differently, right? But at the same time, you are different, right? Like we say, like you're so different after the loss. And so when people are treating you the same as before the loss, in a way, that also feels like a slap in the face, because why are you acting like nothing happened? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. It's a
So
double-edged sword for
it's a
sure.
double-edged sword. It's like you don't want to be treated differently in terms of like having people walk on eggshells around you or feeling like they can't say certain things. But at the same time, I also don't want anybody to act like nothing fucking happened and tell me this shitty gossip about their trivial lives, like that I don't care about, right now at least.
Yeah, exactly. I think another thing too is like during that time, you're coming to terms with the fact that you have to leave this old version of your life and yourself behind. And you're realizing like that person is gone,
Ugh.
that life is gone, and you're never going to be able to live that life again. Like I would want to say like 99.99% of the time, your total life road path gets shifted. It's moved. Like you're just not the same. You're never going to be able to live that life before your person died. Like that's just how
Yeah.
it is. And like you're in this state of shock and denial.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'll always remember my old life and my old self. But I think that you can eventually with time feel like you're getting back above the surface and like
Yeah.
getting some air.
Yeah, and similarly to that, like that's not to say that you won't ever feel like your old self again, or like be able to
Exactly.
get back certain qualities that you used to have. Like for instance, like I was a very extroverted person before my dad passed and before I was dealing with all the anticipatory grief years before he passed. And after he passed, I never thought that I would be able to be that person again who was kind of like bubbly and outgoing and fun. And it took me
Yeah.
so long to finally feel like I have a little bit of that back in me. And so, yeah, it takes a lot of time. And for everybody, that time frame is different, and the increments in which it comes back is totally different too. But I think to encourage people is like, if you did love certain qualities about your past self, like, and that is ingrained in who you are, that it is going to come back
It's good.
eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like, not to worry too much about that, because the core of who you are will always be there. And of course, it's clouded with so much grief and so much pain right now, but that will shine through and you will still have the same essence of who you are.
That was so beautiful. That was really so beautiful.
And that's something I needed to hear, because I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have believed you if you told me that I could be where I am right now. Like I genuinely wouldn't have been able to believe you,
No,
because it
no.
felt impossible.
I think like my inner early day griever is like still inside me. So whenever I like say even like a small speck of positivity, like light at the end of the tunnel, like my inner early griever is like, no, it's not. Like, why are you even saying that?
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, like you just don't believe it. And like you don't even want to believe it
Yeah.
because it's just like, no, because how could anything be positive right now?
Mm-hmm.
And like I still hear that voice. Like I still get her. Like I feel her 100%. But like for me too, it did take a long, long time for some of those aspects of my personality come back. But like you just so eloquently said, like if they're you and they're ingrained in you, like that was you. And like it takes time and it fucking sucks. Again, this is a hand that nobody wanted to be dealt.
Right.
But like, like you do see aspects of yourself come back and along with the new sides of yourself
Yeah.
that, grew from the grief and the trauma.
Right. And I hate to say that you learn things from this fucking grief, but you do. Like you learn how to manage something like that, and you learn
Yeah.
how you can deal with it. Everybody deals with it differently, but you do learn a lot about yourself in that process. Did we want to learn? No. Like, did we,
No.
would
Could
I
I
have
have learned a different way? Yeah, I would have taken the other way.
Yeah, exactly. But you do really learn a lot. And so, like, for instance, something that I've learned from this grief is like just how compassionate, I guess, and understanding I could be. Wow, I'm really gassing myself right now. But yeah, and I feel like my empathy for other people has significantly increased because, when you experience something so fucking terrible, you really can relate to someone going through another terrible thing. I think that's why this community works, is like we all
Right.
can relate on this terrible thing. And that's something that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't experienced this grief, or maybe it would have just way later. And, you know, yeah.
Totally. 100% agree with that.
Hmm.
Just to recap
Yeah.
a little bit. In your going back to normal toolbox, what do we have? We have be transparent. Be transparent with your bosses, with your coworkers, with your fellow students,
With your
or
professor,
professors, whoever it may
with your
be,
friends too.
with your friends.
Honestly,
You
it's
know,
easy to feel like you're at a distance with these people. And, not to say that you can't hold certain things for just yourself and hold those things sacred to you, but I would say that you already feel so disconnected from everybody, and you already feel so misunderstood, and the only thing that you can do is share how you feel and share your grief. That's an honor. That's your love for this person. Don't view it negatively. And I think being transparent with the people in your life, one, help you feel connected to them when you feel already so disconnected, and help them understand a little more instead of feeling disconnected to you too, because you're not really speaking. And not to say that that responsibility lays on you, but it does help a lot when you're communicating how you're feeling, what's going on. And especially when you're going back to work and school, I feel like um you deserve to have that leniency. You deserve to
exactly.
have some cuts, like slack cut for you, because you're not just a regular worker or student. You're going through a lot. You're going through a hard time, and teachers and your boss should understand that. And of course, some professors and some bosses aren't as lenient. Hopefully you have one that's very understanding and very kind, and
Hopefully.
treats you with the kindness that you deserve. Lets you take days off when you need to, lets you be late on deadlines if something were to come up. I think you deserve that. And
Yeah.
so no
You
one's
do
going to stick
deserve
up for
that.
you like you will. You have to stick up.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so true. And while you're saying that, it also kind of makes me remember that a lot of companies give you like 3 days bereavement or something, and it's like some bullshit. So like, yeah, in a perfect world, you have a nice boss when you tell her that,
Yeah.
something happened, and then, she gives you a lot of leniency. But like in the corporate world,
It's
that's
tough.
like not really always possible, and it's just
Yeah.
not the case. And they just kind of see you as like wasting time on the clock or something because you're not like the most productive, you know,
For their numbers.
employee for their number.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then also, like, a lot of places don't, you could take time off, but you're not getting paid. You're not getting bereavement
Exactly.
pay. And that's so fucked up because a lot of people work the hours they need to make payments that have to be paid, like fucking rent
Exactly.
and fucking utilities and shit. So they
Like it
can't
sucks.
afford to take some
It
time
fucking
off.
sucks. Like I recognize that, yeah, of course you would want to take the time off, but like most people cannot just take the time off that you need. Like they're like, yeah, I'm gonna take the 3 days bereavement, but like you have to get back to work. Like,
Yeah.
and it fucking sucks. Like that's why I'm trying to put together this little toolbox so at least you can try to make this miserable time at least a little easier.
Right. So what are some other things in the toolbox? I would say in terms of that, I think is taking care of yourself in ways like just taking
Your
time for
self-soothing techniques.
right, taking the time to do your self-soothing techniques, whether that's journaling or meditating or doing something you love and being creative, just taking the time for yourself to let yourself be and honor your feelings and put yourself first, I feel like is so important, because you will end up feeling like you're fucking drowning in responsibility and in who you should be for these other people and who you have to be versus how you actually are.
Yeah, totally. Just listening to yourself, like, meditating is hard, but like even if you just go on a walk and you don't listen to anything, you just kind of sit there in your own thoughts, like that's meditating. Or I guess you wouldn't be sitting in this part, you would be walking, but still, you get my point. Like you're just listening to your inner self. Like it sucks a lot of time, because after this, like your inner self is probably hurting really bad. But like whatever you find to be soothing, you need to put that as a priority as much as you possibly can. And I know it's really, really hard, because you probably have a lot of things going on, but like you do deserve to like give yourself space to just be.
Another hard part, I think, about going back to normal is that feeling like life doesn't stop. And so once you're going back to normal, you have things to do, like pay rent, you have to, I don't know, just like do all these things, and life continues. And then it just like just feels like it's all piling up on you and you can't handle it. And that's why it's so important to like take a breath and just like just let yourself feel what you feel. Think it through. It's so, you're in a very emotional state, you're very vulnerable, and so it's very easy to make very impulsive decisions and just make poor decisions. And so you really have to think everything through and make sure that you're doing what's best for you in the end of the day, and not doing something because you feel like you are expected to be this person in someone's life or in work and blah blah blah. Like, of course you have to do certain things when you're signed up to work or to be a student. You have to like make your assignments, or you have to like do your, I don't know, work shit.
No, totally. It's normal to feel like a zombie. It's normal to go on autopilot and just do what you need to do. And, a lot of times it's just a coping mechanism, to kind of just be feeling really, what's the word? Numb. But
yes.
Yeah, you're in survival mode. And like when you're in survival mode, like it is like something that you have to be mindful about, is like survival mode for long periods of time without pulling yourself out of a break from survival mode is really detrimental. And like you don't want to be hurting more than like you really have to,
both physically and mentally.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, is that what you said about like being in survival mode and autopilot and like just having to continue on. I feel like a lot of people don't get a break, and then before you realize it, you realize that it's been months and you haven't fucking been able to grieve because you have to do all these things. And that happens. That's a really common thing, I feel like, for a lot of people, for me too, because after my dad passed, I had to still finish college. Like I still had to do fucking assignments. And so I feel like I didn't really get the proper time, besides like little moments in my day, to sit and really acknowledge my grief. And that's so common for a lot of people. And then it feels overwhelming because it's been a long period of time where you weren't acknowledging and sitting with these feelings. And now it feels like it's coming all at once, which I think that is what waves of grief is. And maybe that continues. That continues. And I think that still continues for me too, is like I find myself busy as fuck. And in those times, I'm not really able to sit and think. And then when I have a moment to sit and think, it sometimes feels daunting.
Totally.
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate what I was saying earlier before, but I think this is a really good tool to have in your going back to normal toolbox, is just like knowing and kind of preparing that people are going to say stuff that is just you do not want to answer. And even in past episodes when we talked about things that people say that are really insensitive and stuff, like instead of allow, like, instead of having your emotions like come up when somebody says something insensitive, like, and let me just say, I did not practice this. I did not practice this, not even one bit. This is something that I wish that I did. But I think now I can say, I really wish that I just did not give these people the time of day, and that I was just like giving them a little bit more grace, because I know that they're just very ignorant. And not in like a bad way. They're just ignorant of how grief really is. So they just say these things. And, you know, it's more for myself, to protect myself and protect my peace, to not react when somebody says something that doesn't, you know, rub me the right way. Respond with answers that you already know. You've already, even just write it down. Be like, if somebody asks me this, this is my generic response. This is my blanket response that I'm going to be giving to people. You can just be like, I'm not comfortable talking about that right now. That is a nice way of being like, fuck off. Why would you ask me that? And honestly, they're gonna feel it. They're gonna be like, oh, we probably shouldn't ask that. Again, they're like a little ignorant, you know, but like, have these things that you say, even if it's just a generic, is like, I'm okay, thanks for asking, like, period, end of story. Literally just copy and paste that shit into the text box and move on, you know? Like,
yeah, instead of getting worked up and being like, why would they ask me this? Or
yeah,
like, isn't there anything else they could have said?
yeah. And you know what? There is a lot of other things they could have said, and that's totally true.
And that's in
but
our
they
episode, How to Be a Good Friend.
But they didn't. So, you know, you kind of just need like, and like, have that in your toolbox. Have those things that you just say, those blanket statements, those copy and pastes.
Yeah.
Just to have.
You know what? This is how I'm going to describe it feels like, how it feels to be in grief. You know, like a shoegaze, like a 90s shoegaze album where it's like all like blurry, like the world is all blurry, like it's like usually like blurred motion. Like that's how it feels. Like you're stationary and then the whole world is moving around you in this, like you're just like this, and then everyone's like shh,
oh my God.
and it's just like you feel like a fucking ghost. Like you feel like
you do feel like a ghost.
No one can see what the fuck you're going through, see the amount of pain you're going through. And I think
that's so true. You're just walking around the hallways, walking around the grocery store, walking your dog in the park, and you're just looking around at everyone. The world's spinning, but you're just stopped. Yet you're somehow still, the time is still going by. And you're just looking around like, oh my gosh, none of these people even know what I'm going through right now.
Yeah. And I think that that's a feeling that that people can relate to outside of grief too. Like if you're just struggling a lot mentally, you can relate to that feeling of the world passing you by without you in it.
Definitely.
But it's really extreme when you're grieving someone, because you just feel like no one understands.
Totally. At the end of the day, going back to normal, there is no normal. We said that. And it's painful to see like the world keep spinning while
ours stopped.
So whatever reaction you have to that is completely valid. And a lot of times it's just like numbness or autopilot. And it's really hard, but like trust in the friends and the close people in your life to, you know, the people that you do trust, you know, to be there for you, and just trust that it takes time to navigate, you know, going back into reality, your new reality.
Yeah. And it sucks even having to navigate through it, because like we said, it's not a card that we would have dealt. It's not something we fucking chose to take on. But it is something we have to now. It's something you have to carry with you now, which sucks. And I'm sorry that that's something you're dealing with. But we
didn't have a choice to have it happen to us, and we don't have a choice to continue on
to live through it, or live with it. Actually, not through it, live with it. And that takes a lot of time to figure out what works for you. Like we said, the trial and error in the very beginning, which is you have to figure out what your boundaries are, you know, in terms of what you're willing to do now and in terms of what you can handle. Only you know what feels good and what feels like shit. And there's nothing wrong with it feeling like shit. Like something that you love to do might feel like shit now. And that might feel shitty, but at the same time, what's shittier is putting yourself through that feeling like shit. How many times am I going to say shit in one sentence? But it's the truth is that it just takes time to figure out what's where you stand in these things. And that's fine. It's just, you know, it's just really hard and tough because it's going to be a lot of realizing that maybe that's not for you.
Yeah. You're really just figuring out yourself.
Yeah. Figuring out yourself out.
It's a rebirth.
It's a rebirth. Yeah, it is. It's a
you
new
know how
life.
hard being birthed is? It's hard to find yourself. It's hard to be rebirthed. Okay.
Yeah, and learning new things.
Be very gracious with yourself. Like, don't be too hard on yourself, and don't feel guilty for anything.
Yeah.
Don't feel guilty for saying no to people. Don't be guilty for, you know, maybe feeling a little selfish sometimes when you choose yourself.
Yeah. On that note, I want to reiterate that we are oftentimes our biggest haters and our biggest critics because we just are. That's just the fact, is that we are oftentimes the biggest critics. Unless you're a narcissist and you gas yourself up all the time. I don't know. Most people are really critical of themselves, oftentimes too critical. In that, I just want to say, try to tell yourself, or try to think about, if your best friend or someone you loved were in the exact same situation that you were in, what you would tell them, right? If they didn't want to go out, what would you tell them? Would you tell them, no, you have to, you already agreed to these plans? Or would you tell them, bitch, you don't have to go anywhere, let's just stay home? You know, something as simple as that. It's really, I feel like that's really helpful for me, is like taking myself out of my body and just thinking about, if this was someone that I love experiencing this, what would I say to them? And listen to that advice, because you cannot listen sometimes to your own advice because you gaslight yourself. You're way too harsh on yourself. And I'm honestly talking about myself right now, but if this applies to you, then this applies to you. You know, this, I hope it doesn't resonate with a lot of people, but if it does, then that's something that I would say, is try to think about what you would tell your loved one in the same position as you, and listen to that advice instead of listening to what's in your head, because your head is oftentimes way too harsh and way too critical.
That's so true. That is a great note to end on right there. I love that. I've always loved that advice. Like, talk to yourself how you would talk to your best friend or someone that you really love.
Yeah, because we love ourselves, like we do, and it's like hard when you're fucking clouded, or you deserve to love yourself. Maybe you don't love yourself right now, but you deserve that love that you give. You deserve that love for yourself. You deserve it so much, okay? And you cannot forget that, how much you are deserving of that same love that you're willing to give out.
Yeah, 100%. That's the toolbox, baby.
Well,
love yourself. Don't forget how much you're worth. Have those copy and paste messages to just send to those people who you just do not feel like opening up to. Be transparent to people who might be able to help you and make your transition to quote unquote normal life a little easier. And last one, have your self-soothing techniques and know what makes you feel good, whether it's a walk, whether it's an exercise class, whether it's a journal, whether it's a, you know, crafts.
Yes.
Meditation, yoga, any of that.
And don't forget that it is a learning process too, trial and error, like I said, like fucking 4 times already, but it is that, you know, and you're gonna have to make mistakes to learn that that's not for you or whatever, but don't be.
Yeah, you're just finding yourself, so don't be harsh on yourself.
Yeah.
A rebirth. I love a good rebirth. Not when it comes out like this, not when it's this horrible and traumatic, but you know what? It's a new chapter.
Mhm.
Did we want the other chapter to end? No. But it's a new chapter and we got to write it ourselves. So, yeah.
That was perfect. You have to write it. You're in control here. You are the author.
You are the author of your own destiny.
On that note, you guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Grief Uncensored. Next week, we will be back with another guest.
Carson Drain.
We will have Carson Drain joining us next week. Her TikTok is at Carry On with Carson. You can check it out there. We're so excited to have her on, and we hope that you guys resonate with that episode too. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.